You're watching the news from Kazakhstan. I'm Marina Kim. Here are the top stories. Activists of the movement Zhiltaksan Akikati are trying to justify their colleagues who insulted and pelted with eggs the potential presidential candidate Vladimir Kozlov. Cabinet members finally acknowledge skyrocketing food prices. Social Democrats demand their resignation. Azienmunaygas employees say there might be someone behind the car accident that placed one of trade union leaders in a hospital bed. The public association Zhiltaksan Akikat stated on Tuesday that it supports the activists of the union Zhiltaksan Ruhi and Zhiltaksan Tauel Sazdik Karandari, who last week disrupted a press conference of the movement Narodovlastie, the democracy. The attack of the nationalist-minded people was targeted at Vladimir Kozlov for his intention to run for presidency in the next elections. Kozlov was publicly insulted as well as pelted with eggs and plastic bottles. Zhiltaksan members refused to comment the escapade of their associates but justified the very motive behind the protest, bringing up the events of 1986. They say only an ethnic Kazakh can be a president of the country. Last week, the leader of the National Patriots, Mukhtar Shakhanov, also spoke of the incident. He said he saw nothing bad in the candidacy of Vladimir Kozlov, although according to the constitution, all candidates should pass the language test first. In the meantime, Kozlov said he will not fall for provocations and will sue Zhiltaksan members for their anti-constitutional actions.
So let me get this straight. You say that you need at least 400 years? The cramped office of the public union Zhiltaksan hosted a meeting of the organization's activists after they have been denied any other public platform. Their union members proposed to wait at least 400 years until they will be okay with politicians who might possess questionable knowledge of Kazakh will be allowed to run for presidency. A similar situation was observed in 1986 when power was assumed by a person who didn't know Kazakh. I support this protest campaign, although I cannot really comment on the actual egging. Everyone can make their own conclusions. Zhiltaksan members believe Kozlov has mortally insulted all Kazakh citizens, although Kozlov is also a Kazakh citizen, thus he has the right to at least forward his candidacy. Coordinator of the party Alga Bibigul Rymkulova, also present at the conference, asked a logical question: why the same language skills questions are never addressed to the incumbent MPs? Why these heated debates arise only in specific situations? Why don't you demand our MPs to also talk in Kazakh? Because they know Kazakh, while other ethnic groups chose not to use it. Vladimir Kozlov himself feels that people who disrupted the press conference do not represent the views of the entire Kazakh society, but only of a fraction of troublemakers and hooligans. The politician will not reinterpret the constitution and has already drafted a statement for the prosecutor. Who did actually insult the dignity of Kazakhs? Who yelled loudly? Who tramped and forgot all traditions of the Kazakh nation by yelling at the elder Serik Balsyn Abdildin, a person respected by everyone in the Kazakh society? The union doesn't seem to have a clear vision of the new state order. Replying to journalists, they failed to name a single name of the potential presidential candidate, although it was apparently difficult to refuse leaving the honor for themselves. There are many candidates as for my preferences. Well, I can become the president too.
Cabinet members finally acknowledged on Tuesday the deteriorating situation on the country's food, despite the prices growing steadily for already a month. The government spent the entire recent teleconference on the pricing issue. The Competition Protection Agency reported that it takes all necessary measures, including launching investigations against suppliers of basic foodstuffs.
The Kazakh government finally acknowledged that prices for the socially important goods like bread, flour, cereals, meat and vegetable oil have unreasonably and significantly gone up. In some regions, the prices have jumped as high as 1.5 times. The chief anti-monopolist talks at the prices collusion, blaming businessmen and regional authorities in particular. Local executive bodies take measures to normalize the prices. As the region governor said, everything is under control and the price increase is not expected anytime soon. While the government is trying to stop the growth of prices, bazaar traders in Astana keep changing their price tags. Gulzhahan Bayjanova points at the wholesale dealers for blame. Just a week ago, 1 liter of vegetable oil cost $1. Now it costs $2. Almost all products got more expensive. Of course, it reflects immediately on our wallets, but neither the wholesale buyers nor the government can explain the situation. Astana residents believe the jump of prices is a pure profiteering. This basically means that there is no deficit and subsequently no reasons for the increase of prices. Prices for all goods increase every month and every day. How can we survive this? I hear people complain all the time about the increase of prices and constantly low salaries. Ministers admit another increase of prices for eggs and poultry meat. The apparent reason is the deficit of feed grain, which also grew in cost. We've raised this issue many times before. We understand that poultry farming is a dynamically developing industry and we have to keep the same pace. The government has ordered governors to monitor the prices for the primary foodstuffs, namely meat, cereals, bread and flour. In turn, the Competition Protection Agency instigated several criminal cases against the suppliers of food products for the unfounded rise of prices.
The oppositional party Azad demands the resignation of the entire cabinet. Supposedly, it cannot handle the growth of prices for food and utilities. At a press conference in Almaty, Azad members supported their calls with an independent study of price growth across all regions of the country. The findings differ significantly with the official data revealed by the statistics agency just recently.
The initiators of the independent study claim the government has deliberately understated statistics, fearing the resentment of the population. The cabinet has exhausted all of its resources in the fight against the inflation and is unable to stop growth of prices. In response, Azad demands an immediate intervention of the head of state and the dismissal of the government, starting with the Prime Minister Karim Masimov. In the last 10 or 20 years, none of our prime ministers were fired. All of them resigned voluntarily. We propose to fire the incumbent premier for his failures and poor performance in the office. We have to start somewhere. Since the president is untouchable, he should bring his own protégés to responsibility.
Here's what the people on the streets of Semey had to say about the growth of prices and the government's ability to cope with the aggravating situation.
The prices do not become stable, they just keep growing. In 2 months, the prices have gone even higher. This is unacceptable. Nothing is done about the situation. The prices only become higher. I wish everything would be stable, but no, it is quite the opposite. The prices are growing, although all of our shopping is done by my wife, and she says that the prices have gone up. Thus, the government promises us one thing, but does something totally different. I don't know if the situation depends on the government, but the prices have definitely grown.
Infamous human rights activist Talas Agimbayev calls for the resignation of the country's MP Borjan Smailov, supposedly for illegally raising the dwelling of an Astana resident. Before becoming a parliamentarian, Smailov led one of the capital's construction companies and became the third member of the lower chamber, targeted by the defrauded co-investors and the informal leader.
A well-known human rights activist, Talas Agimbayev, is suing the MP Borjan Smailov, accusing him of fraud. Supposedly, in 2007, Smailov's construction company dealt in illegal demolition of houses. Moreover, the future MP was not paying compensations for people's raised property. If the accusations will stand, Smailov might lose his MP status early. No one forced him to legally bind his promises. He did this himself. Smailov's dismissal has been already demanded last year. Then Agimbayev represented the interests of the real estate investors of several unfinished properties. In his turn, the MP claimed that he has nothing to do with the business and called the actions of the co-investors the ill plotting of his foes. Everyone was at the scene, including the police and ambulances, but we were still kicked out. This is not the first action organized by the human rights activists against parliamentarians. Last year, Agimbayev's efforts led to the resignation of the MPs Viktor Tsoy and Erkanat Tayjanov. Both claimed they have nothing to do with the construction business. As a result, they had to leave the parliament voluntarily. I am the youngest MP and you are my older colleagues. I learned many things from you and I promise that I will use this parliamentary experience in the rest of my life. No one can say now whether the current parliament convocation will survive to see the next elections. In this sense, it is interesting to note that some experts predict the early start of the electoral cycle, which means that as the race draws closer, the MPs will show more fear towards public scandals.
Hunger-striking real estate investors in Astana speak of their readiness to launch a series of protest actions on the eve of the OSCE summit. Activists of the Public Association for Worthy Housing planned their first major rally for November 6. 110 days ago, the co-investors went on a hunger strike against the government decree limiting the property ownership to one apartment per person.
The hunger strike of real estate investors from Astana continues already for 4 months. They might say that they got used to it, but it's unlikely they've lost the track of days past. It seems that we've been striking for a year. It was hard at the beginning, but it's different now. First we counted days, and though we won't last longer than a month. The hunger strike is observed in shifts. Rizeda Simimbinova is here for already the second time. She admits being scared during the first shift. However, the bank is trying to confiscate her only apartment while her third grandson is on the way. Thus, the fight with hunger no longer seemed as hard as the struggle for her rights. Hunger is hunger, no matter how many times you experienced it in the past. It is always hard, and I wouldn't wish it to anyone. The end of the hunger strike is planned for the day of the OSCE summit, will include its work in Astana in exactly 1 month. Like in the past, co-investors intend to remind the authorities of their existence and are preparing for mass rallies. Theoretically, it will be difficult for the government to conceal the issue with so many representatives of European countries around. Kazakh authorities have shown their complete indifference for 110 days, and the international community also had no reaction whatsoever in these 110 days. We want them to do so again during the summit to draw the attention of people living in these 56 member states. The only sanctioned place for a rally is at the cross of Pushkina and Shakirim Kudayberdi. It is located next to a noisy highway right in the middle of an industrial zone. It is highly doubtful European leaders would ever go this far in their quest to learn Kazakhstan better. This entire space will be filled with our members, with evicted people or those pressed for eviction, as well as others who have housing problems in Kazakhstan. Luckily, the city administration didn't cut down the action time to 1 hour as it usually does. The protesters will now have the luxury of standing in a vacant lot for about 2 hours. At the same time, co-investors said on Tuesday's press conference that they are ready for unsanctioned rallies, and this time they will reserve the right to choose an appropriate location.
Zhanaozen police is still looking for the car which hit trade union leader of the Ozen-Munaygas production branch Savet Takenov. On Sunday, he was crossing the street when a speeding vehicle clipped him and then dragged several meters along the road. Just recently, Ozen-Munaygas employees ended their 5-day-long strike after suspected provocation of the authorities against another trade union activist, Tagan Shukenov. Following new incident, the oilfield workers say the system is still trying to intimidate them into submission.
The driver has fled the scene of the accident. Currently, the trade union activist is in the Zhanaozen city hospital, diagnosed with cerebral injury. Doctors say that the condition of the patient is satisfactory. The city road police is still looking for a driver responsible for the accident. Takenov's colleagues speculate that this could be a planned crime and a possible assassination attempt. Public activists and opposition members have noted several times before that in the past, car accidents were used to get rid of undesirable people. Famous independent journalists Askhad Sharibzhanov, Sakinta Urzhanov and Batyrkhan Darimbetov all died in similar circumstances, although the contract nature of the accidents was never proven. Employees discussed the matter and many believe this was a planned accident. The criminal case has been instigated already and the police is looking for a black BMW.